There we go. All right. Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the ItCast. I am your host, Nika Sherelle. The ItCast Real Talk on Sex is our community outreach podcast that increases diversity in conversations on health and sexuality. Through this work, we are creating a world where all people feel loved, honored, and respected. This show is brought to you by the International Institute for Sexual Empowerment and the House of Sherelle. We've got some events coming up for you, very exciting. So, we have our third Global Summit coming up, formerly known as the Global Sexual Health and Freedom Summit, now known as the IISE Global Summit. This year, we're focusing on reclaiming sexuality, and we are taking people through a transformative week long journey through healing, exploration, and celebration. You can get tickets on that in the QR code and check out our weekly Freedom Support Group every Sunday, all online from noon to 1 Pacific. That's hosted by Ethology Collective and the House of Sherelle. If you want to get one-on-one coaching with me, go ahead and go to my link tree, book a free connection session and ask me anything, tell me how I can serve you. Also, we want to hear from you about the show, so ask us anything here too. Put your comments and questions in the chat and stay engaged. Get access to our bonus content on Patreon, where you can see our green room and our after chat. And that is patreon.com/Nika Sherelle. You can see it on that QR code. Subscribe to this YouTube channel and share with your community. All right, let's go ahead and dive into this week's episode. Today is Real Talk on Transforming Pelvic Health. Today in the booth, we have Allison Schultz. Allison, Allison, a proud queer sex worker, health query podcast host, physical therapist assistant, pelvic health specialist, sex witch, and the visionary founder and CEO of the nonprofit Pelvic Pelvic Sanctuary celebrates a diverse journey. Holding an MFA from CarlArts and embracing her library school dropout status, Alice has dedicated Allison has dedicated herself to preserving and archiving human sexuality. With a rich background in grant funded positions at renowned special collections such as the Tom of Finland Foundation and the Kinsey Institute, the leather archives and the museum, Allison has significantly contributed to the documentation of human sexuality. Her mission goes beyond the ordinary, aiming to revolutionize the paradigm of pelvic health. Allison strives to create space that warmly welcomes LGBTQIA plus individuals, fostering a holistic approach that embraces a wide spectrum of perspectives on sexuality. Through her work, she endeavors to redefine and expand the boundaries of pelvic health, promoting inclusivity and understanding. All right, Allison, let's have you hop on the show. Hi.
Hello.
Oh, how are you today?
I'm great, all things considered, grateful to be
Yes,
safe and happy here in Los Angeles. So, yeah.
yeah, very, very grateful, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so tell us a bit about yourself and why you were choosing to do this show.
Oh gosh, that intro was so I was like, did I do all that? It's very
Humble.
hard. um I mean, I chose to do the show because it's amazing. It's an honor to be on the show, and I've been learning so much myself from the show and listening to previous episodes. It's just like these taboo subjects around sexual wellness and health. There's just not enough information out there. So we have, and there's so much to learn. So we just need to just be sharing and learning from each other as much as possible. And yeah.
Yes. Yes, I love that. I love that. And it's true. We have to talk about these things. If we're not talking about it, we're not learning, we're not growing at all. What so I want to talk about the I guess the sex part of pelvic health. Like it's taboo, there's shame, there's all this jazz. But it's like, okay, let's get away from speculums and all that jazz and like talk about the fun part of it. How can we have that?
Yeah, I love talking about the sex part. That's my favorite. Uh, And I don't think people always realize like that is, I come more from a physical therapy background. And then of course I have a sex work background, which really supports that in a lot of ways. Cause I have a broader idea of what sex can be, also as a queer person. Um, so, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people don't realize that when they think of physical therapy, they think of childbirth. Maybe they think of incontinence, which is definitely one of our most common issues we see, but they don't realize that we can also coach you through sexual dysfunctions, and we can treat sexual dysfunction. So a lot of people haven't like made that connection, because physical therapy is like more about body mechanics and anatomy and physiology and how things are working. And that's what physical therapists do. You know, when you get a rotator cuff repair, you get that fixed. And we can do the same, but yeah, it's just not as covered. So there's a lot of conditions that I don't even think people are aware that they exist. So I'm just trying to get that terminology out there, and like let people know that these things are treatable. And if you do find a pelvic floor PT, you can ask for help. So one of the ones I wanted to talk about was two, actually, vaginismus and dyspareunia, which is vaginismus is pain with penetration. That can be like inserting a tampon. It doesn't have to be intercourse. So it could be inserting a dildo or a tampon or intercourse, or going to get a pelvic health exam, a speculum. And then dyspareunia is similar, but it's more pain during intercourse. So
Okay. And these are consistent things. So like no matter like penetration in general overall is a painful experience. That's vaginismus.
vaginismus. So,
Yeah.
and you know, we also need to talk about these things because like particularly like young women might be experiencing this and not know
Yeah.
that yeah, so that why they can't put a tampon in, like they might, you know, um
Huh.
and it can
And
prevent people from getting pap smears and things like that due to fear of pain. And then, of course, women tend to grin and bear it if they're having pain with sex, and just a lot of OBGYNs and folks will just not really offer solutions because it's not really their realm. So, um,
yeah. Well, and also sex isn't every time I've done an episode around the medical arena and sexuality, it's always sex for the purpose of function, not for the purpose of pleasure. So if you're having uncomfortable sex, that's not as relevant as infertility. And it's like, okay, well, I understand that, but how do we actually get through these places where it's not common to have discomfort? It's not expected.
yeah, yeah. So I think just talking about it more and learning, I'll show you like some of the things you might see in pelvic floor PT, and things that you can look into more on your own are, I brought like some of my props. So I was joking earlier, I'm like the carrot top of pelvic health. Like I love all the tools and sharing them. This is called a pelvic wand. So this hypersensitivity, like in the vaginal canal or of the like the tissue, you know, we can kind of calm it down in different ways. So I mean, there can be. This is why it's important to have an internal exam and assessment if you're comfortable with that. But it could also be tightness. There could be like imbalances in the muscles in your pelvic floor, that so muscles maybe need to be stretched a little. So you can do this yourself with these pelvic wands. Just kind of gently release, just like almost like trigger point therapy. So
Yeah.
you can figure out where that tension is, or where in the tissue you're getting that.
Ah.
Or you can stretch the muscles, or you can just work with maybe the tissue is just hypersensitive. So even just like a light touch while you're combining sort of breath work and calming techniques to kind of train the brain to be less reactive. So these are things, you know, you can also do this kind of work with your partner, but I find it's best to kind of start yourself. So that's a pelvic wand. And then we have another thing that's common are these.
We do have a question in the chat, which it says, where can I get one?
Yes. This is from this brand. This company is called Intimate Rose, and they're kind of the gold standard in the physical therapy world. And they have a lot of different, great things. So check out Intimate Rose. That's also who does these dilators. So they're like, this is my smaller set. So look at how, you know, if you're having trouble with just a tampon, like, you know, you might want to start with like smaller. But again, you know, it's all individual, and, you know, and then you can just build up. Doing breath work. I really like combining this with breath work or like restorative yoga poses, like resting yoga poses where you're very like supported, your limbs are supported, and you can kind of make a little nest for yourself and relax and just start playing with these tools. These are also what we use for when people have gender affirming surgery, when trans women get a neovagina, they have to dilate regularly so that the tissue doesn't close. So these are also good for that. Or if you'd like to have anal sex and you're nervous about it, you can.
Flange. You must, anytime you're gonna do anal, you got to have that little flared base, just in case anyone didn't know.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then my third favorite thing. This is a different company. I don't work for any of these companies. I just want everyone to know where to find stuff. Onut. And this can be, here, I'll hold it a little longer. So that these are amazing, and they're like little penis bumpers. So if your partner, if the penetration is too deep, you could have 1, 2. You can stack them. They come in 4. So you kind of wrap them around each other, and you can put them over condoms. And it just makes it so that so your partner is still feeling something inside of here, but and can press all the way down. But it just makes everything hit you a little shorter. So really great if your partner has a favorite position that's not working for you and you want to compromise. Or if, you know.
That is phenomenal. Anyone out there who is listening who didn't see that has to go on YouTube and watch this little demonstration and see the look on my face. It's amazing.
And it's so big.
And they stretch. Oh, but that's a great solution. You know, I've heard about the dilators when it comes to vaginal tightness and with gender affirming surgery. But I love the very clear way that you're talking about, like stretching the muscles and like, what is that massage? What is it like to actually flex? Like anytime you're going to go do acrobatics, you got to warm up first. So it's the same thing in the space of pelvic health. And I think one of the things I've seen is that people rush way too fast into wherever you're going with your pelvis, I'll just say. But it's like moving too quick for the body, not letting the body slow down, catch up, warm up, and understand. So a lot of damage happens there. And I love that these tools, I was just saying, like these tools that are helping both create the pleasure and reduce the harm.
Yeah, and what you said is so important is if you push, because part of this is like your neuropaths, right? Like your brain's getting the message like, oh, like he's gonna, or what, my partner is going to penetrate me with something and it's gonna hurt, and you brace yourself. And you're training your brain to feel pain. So and then if it's too fast, or you're pushing yourself or gritting your teeth and bearing it, what you're saying is so important, because then you're reinforcing that for your mind. So it's going to get worse, not better. Like, so that's why it can be nice to just really you're retraining your response, and you can ramp up really slowly and take time and explore, when you don't have the pressure of satisfying your partner, if they're not as patient. When you're alone, you can explore different positions, and it's like we were saying, it's not about the sex, it's about healing
Right.
your body. And then you bring your partner in. Yeah.
And I love that, just to be so clear, like this is not masturbation. This isn't like that end goal based thing that we do. It is the journey. It's the healing aspect of it. So I love that, just as a distinguishing factor. I'm sure that these
Yeah.
toys will all help you get there, but that's not the point of this work.
Yes, that's very important. Yeah, to know that you can do just like doing your stretches in the morning, or going for a run, or your meditation practice, or whatever. It's just, and if it leads to pleasure and you want to masturbate, that's awesome. Think of it as just masturbation self-care too, but it
Well,
doesn't, we don't have to be together. Yeah.
and I say that for people out there who are pre-orgasmic or who have trouble orgasming, that like this is something to help with that development, with that practice, versus another like force fix.
Mhm.
Because I think those come up a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is awesome. This is awesome. And um this is in that space of enjoying your body. Like we talked about that a bit before too. And so now I'm hearing like this space where you can actually step into it. Can you share a little bit more?
Like step into exploring.
Enjoying your body. I guess
Yeah.
like
I mean, for yeah, if we're getting into like the pleasure zone, I mean, I feel like that can also be like a blurred space, if that makes sense. So, even if you're not like getting orgasmic with this stuff, it can still be pleasurable, and that like you put on some nice music, you do some breath work, you can still enjoy it without it becoming about being
mhm.
aroused. And then yeah, I mean, the other thing, when I think about enjoying my body solo, I think about sex magic, which we talked about a little. I don't know if we want to go there yet, or I'm making things out of order. But
No, it's fine. Wherever you want to go, take us.
um, yeah, I mean, for me, that also is not necessarily about achieving orgasm. But like that was something I got into just from doing this work, and like kind of didn't realize that I was doing. So I think um, I was listening to another podcast, and I was listening to this sex witch, Gabriella Herstick, be interviewed. And she said something that like blew my mind. Is she said something about uh, the interviewer asked her, he was like, oh, he was interviewing her about being a sex witch. And he was like, what kind of, what kind of porn do you look at? And she was just like, oh, I don't really look at porn. Like, she was like, why would I waste my like magical energy on pornography when I could be manifesting? And I was like, what?
Hmm. Okay.
And so I took that, and and then I started learning a little bit more about sex magic, and how, and kind of removing myself from pornography, and like the same fantasies I kind of
Hmm.
have the same stuff in my spank bank forever, and it's always just worked for me. And I never thought about like, I think I was treating I do achieve orgasm quite easily, so I was kind of treating it like just, I don't know, just getting it done and like enjoying it, but hadn't thought about like really lengthening it,
Mhm.
and thinking about other things besides
Yeah.
other people and their bodies, and like, you know, the same stuff I think about. Like I was like, and it took a while. It was a little uncomfortable at first, like the porn we kept trying to pop in my head and like
Right.
all the porn flashbacks. And I had to kind of like just slowly like try almost like a meditation, like just be like, wait, go like maybe think about something. I like to visualize myself how I want to be, like whether
Mm.
that's sometimes I visualize myself like doing an amazing belly dance performance and being in really good shape and really strong and like really powerful. And I like try to maintain that through my whole masturbation and then like kind of and climax with it. And um yeah. And I
Yeah.
have these really sustained, long, powerful orgasms that are so much better, like so much better. So
Yes. I'm hearing like, the like popcorn orgasm, it's like, okay, we're gonna
yeah.
put this in the wave and pop, get it done, versus that like slowing down and being with yourself. And we've done a couple of episodes. One was just around like being in your body when it comes to sex instead of being in your head. So that whole like forcing the pleasure, trying to get somewhere. It's like just slow down and be in your skin, and that has such a transformational aspect to it. We also talked about sex magic, which I love that you're bringing this in because it's that channeling the power of the erotic energy. So I've heard of people like not having sexual engagement so that they can like harness it, chi, different things that they refer
Mhm.
to, and actually utilize that with intentionality. And so hearing the same situation with actually taking on the practice and manifesting and putting your intention in there, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and you can make love to yourself. Like it sounds so corny, but like I'll take like a moonlight walk and listen to some of my favorite like playlist of love ballads, and you can have foreplay with yourself. And I think that's actually like a disadvantage I'd never thought about, and being like a pretty orgasmic person and like never having an issue there is like I never took the time with myself because I was easy. I was easy even for me. Like I was treating myself like I wasn't even respecting my own. I was just like, let's just get it done. Cool. Now what? And I'm like, no, you deserve better. Like so yeah, and I will say with there is a lot of like I might get a little backlash for this, but like with the there is a lot of like trends I see going around with uh cisgender men around like abstinence and celibacy, and there's a thing called reverse ejaculation. And I just want to say and while I do have a spiritual practice, like I don't claim to be a tantrika or have like really done a deep dive on the spiritual side of those practices, but just from a physiological, like from the medical side of things, like uh, not full for cis males to not ejaculate can lead to, and the reverse ejaculation can lead to prostatitis.
Oh,
Yeah, which is irritated prostate. And it's not there's evidence leading us to believe that it can also increase your risk of prostate cancer, because one of the things it does is it's clearing toxins from your prostate.
mm,
And what I've
mm.
also had to treat is men doing this practice and then returning to have intercourse because they're not really want to be monks. They're just like, kind of cherry picking practices. They have trouble completing because they've been trained themselves to not complete, and then their partner is disappointed. So because they're trained their neuropath to not ejaculate. So it's just something I just encourage people to look always at the medical side of things and the spiritual side of things, and kind of make a whole rounded, informed decision when starting some of these practices.
Yeah.
And we do know that orgasms, release endorphins that are great for your mental health. And so, yeah,
Yes.
I
Yeah,
lean
and I
toward. pro orgasm is what I always lean towards, but
Yes. I love that you brought up prostatitis, because one of the things you mentioned is like we all have a pelvic floor. And this happens a lot when we're talking to people in female gendered bodies, where, okay, like we're talking about Kegels and we're talking about, like the urinary tract, we're talking about having a baby and like all these different things, very commonplace. And talking about like that situation, I've heard it in the past that like that can lead to prostate cancer. So actually having that well-rounded scope, that this is not just a woman's conversation. Like, I love that you
yeah.
brought that in.
Thank you for saying that. That is definitely a big part of what one of the catalysts for like actually starting my nonprofit is when I went to school to study physical therapy, I knew I wanted to specialize in pelvic health, and then I quickly knew I wanted to specialize in serving LGBT folks, LGBTQIA plus folks, because and if you kind of do research to find a pelvic floor therapist, first of all, there's not very many of them because they don't teach it in school. So you have to pay a lot of extra money to get the training. And then it's a specialized skill. So people that offer it tend to do cash-based practices to make more money. And it's usually, you're going to find like a pink website with a skinny white Pilates lady being like, get rid of your damn tie, get rid of your baby belly. And I was just like, I took offense to that even as a white woman, because I was like, well, I'm not just here to reproduce, and I still have a pelvic floor, and there's a million other reasons I could need help. But then, and even this is like one area where like even cisgender men aren't really taken care of. So,
Yep.
and then you have to, so I think a lot of people, I've even noticed when I tell people about the mission of Pelvic Sanctuary to make pelvic health education, provide free pelvic health education that is inclusive and focuses on the needs of marginalized and stigmatized populations. So that would be LGBTQIA plus and sex workers. Even when I say that to people, their brain still goes to moms. Like they always, they're like, oh, well, I know an organization that serves women, and I'm like, yeah, that's great and that's important, but that's not our mission. So, and most people, like, I'm glad you said everybody has a pelvic floor, because I don't even think a lot of people realize that. So, and it's a bowl of muscles. I'm sure you've covered this in episodes, but it's a bowl of muscles. And what gets people's attention, as I say, it's literally holding your organs in your body right now. That's a big deal to everyone. It's working with your diet. It's keeping you breathing. It works directly with your diaphragm for respiration. So breathing is important. Having your organs in your body is important. Let's start there. Those two things. Then if that's not enough, then I say, well, it also helps. It also is where addresses your sexual function and the muscles that, all your sexual function is rooted there, and your bladder and bowel health. So anything with incontinence can relate to your pelvic floor. And then, it can just have, it can have, just like any other muscle group, you can have pain, like unwanted chronic pain there that can be mysterious and need to be addressed.
Yeah.
We're sitting all the time. That's not great for our pelvic floor. And then the other end of the spectrum is athletes that do a lot of high impact, like gymnasts and runners. They can get dysfunction, but weightlifters. So it's so important.
I love it. And I love the way that you connected it to the diaphragm, because I'm like literally like, oh, like the diaphragm, the pelvic floor. And no one ever referred to it as a bowl of muscles. That's great, because it connects all of the dots. I even think about like when I do my breathing exercises, I'm like, why do I feel this right right in my taint is not what it's called, perineum.
Right.
Like why do I feel this right there? And so it's really, really cool to have all that connected. We have a question in the chat. It says, "You mean men have a pelvic floor? Why don't we hear about them having having pelvic floor issues?"
Yeah, Betty, I want to know the same thing. They have, I think there's more shaming. So, again, everything's pink and girly, and so they actually hide their issues a lot more. When I was working in general PT, I can't tell you how many times when I'd be treating a guy for a rotator cuff or something, and he'd be like, "Hey, I heard you do something with pelvic floor," and he'd be like, "I've been like having like peeing my pants a little, or I have this pain right here. Is that, or when I have I'm my ejaculation, I'm like dribbling," and he like, "Is that what, can you?" And I'm like, yes, like let's make an appointment.
Oh.
So we don't hear about them because the stigma and the shame, but we all have one. So theirs can do, we in pelvic floor PT, we do, we can treat internally, both vaginally if you have a vagina, or rectally. So we can access some of those muscle groups rectally on men. But just some of this stuff, like sometimes my prescription has been to masturbate, or to so yeah, it's a shame. And then we need to think about like the other issues we're trying to make more content around is, of course, intersex folks. So
Yes.
I know that, I assume if you are if it's like layers and layers upon like stigmatizing and taboo and all of that. So it's like already anyone, your pelvic floor, you're probably going to be a little embarrassed. You're not going to want to talk about it, anybody. But then you add on that, you have to deal with the healthcare system and getting in as an intersex person. And then you have to show, I think that there's a lot of avoidance for receiving, and also a lack of options, even if you do want help, of professionals being trained and aware. And then I'm also really a big fan of, working with the trans community. So there's not enough support for people who are preparing for and recovering from gender affirming surgeries. They should have more protocols and more PTs trained, just like when you get a knee replacement. Here's the protocol before and after. Chest binding, because of what you were talking about earlier with the breath, chest binding affects our pelvic floor. So, I just did a reel about this. Yeah, because we know the diaphragm. And tell me if I can just keep talking and talking. So just tell me. The ribs are constricted, right? And also corsets. If you wear a lot of corsets, I wore a lot of corsets when I was a dominatrix. Yes. So, your diaphragm has to open and close as you breathe. And then that directly corresponds with your pelvic floor. Like they work as a team. So if that's tight, then it's going to put this inner abdominal pressure on your pelvic floor. My favorite thing is to tell people who chest bind at the beginning and before and after to like breathe into their side ribs.
So in the lower chamber of the lung.
See if you can. Actually, that's what I would say almost everybody needs. We breathe a lot in our front and chest. And if at the end of the day, if you can put your hands over your ribs and breathe into them and feel them push out, almost like your diaphragm is like an umbrella. So I almost think of it as an umbrella that broke, and then you want it to go and then come back.
Nice.
And then that's actually going to do a great service to your pelvic floor health and maintenance. So it's not just Kegels. Like you notice we haven't even talked about Kegels yet. So
right.
Like a strong muscle is a long muscle. So if the muscle's not getting to fully expand and stretch before you contract it. A lot of people are doing Kegels and they're just working in this small range of motion, and it can make things tighter. It can make things worse. Kegels can make things
Right.
worse if that's not what you need.
Yeah. It seems like just kind of like a standard muscle pull. Like if you've got extra strain on this muscle, it's going to throw these out of whack. And so looking at the Kegels as that like focused one, localized, then everything else is impacted by that, good or bad. Um, I
Yeah.
want to double back to what you were saying when you were speaking about intersex. So, first off, just to like, acknowledge and hold space for all the listeners in my audience. Intersex is when you are born with some combination of male and female genital anatomy. So, it's not the same thing as trans or transitioning. Definitely look it up. There are several terms, if you look back in the past, that are outdated around it. I'm not going to say any of those. Look it up. And so you can get an understanding of what that means and how gender affirming surgery could look in a multitude of ways if it needs to
Mhm.
look that way at all. So and I like to do that just to make sure that everyone is present and moving forward with us so that we can have these powerful
Yes.
conversations.
Yes. And I'll say one more note for our intersex folks is a lot of times at birth, it's decided for them what gender they're going to be.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's there there's mutilation done. So they've been cut and stitched, and there's scar tissue, and there's other. So there can be um, not just the lack of acknowledgement and the shaming within healthcare, but also they may have specific needs as a result of that procedure being done to them with, at birth. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's an interesting point. I just have to make an argument right there. Like, we have all these conversations around the trans community and when kids should be exposed to these different bits of information, and we're not paying attention to the fact that there are, like, gender like, non-consensual gender assignment surgeries happening all the time to babies with that have no consent. So,
Yeah.
no knowledge or information or awareness, no consent, and so, these are the things where it's like, let's stop and look at the double standard on the one hand, and number 2, let's actually start communicating and talking so that people who are in these gray zones, marginalized areas, unrecognized spaces actually get to exist and have appreciation versus being stuck in this dichotomy. Just had to get on a soapbox for a second. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. It's important. And that's why it's like sometimes like LGBT, and I'm like, no, I gotta say the QIA plus, because that,
Yeah.
especially that I, because I feel like the intersex community is just really is still getting very, very overlooked.
Wow.
So
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, okay, so let's see. We talked about pelvic hair, we talked about Kegels just a little bit.
yeah, I'll
um,
add to that there are many kinds of Kegels. So Kegels can be dynamic, and a lot of people don't think they work, and it's just because they're not doing them correctly. And you can progress them, and you don't always have to be sitting in a chair. You can do them with lunges, with side steps. You can do them, you know, yeah, it's good to
okay.
progress them to be more functional because yeah, you want to be able to hold your pelvic floor strong when you're walking, not just when you're sitting. Yeah, or not just when you're standing in line. So um, Kegels
That's
are a lot more interesting and diverse than people realize as well.
okay. Okay. I was like, there's more than one kind.
Yeah, there's fast twitch and slow twitch, which is really important. So our muscle fibers, we have fast twitch and slow twitch. So one's like the sprinter and one's the long haul runner. So like the fibers that are holding our our pelvic floor muscles, that are the part of our pelvic floor, the fibers that are working all day long to just be active, that's like the slow twitch. It's like, you think of your spinal muscles, like they're holding you up, they're working all day, but you're not like actively contracting them. So your pelvic floor is doing that. It's holding your organs in all day. But then maybe when you have to pee or you sneeze or you cough, like they have to activate more. And that's the fast twitch muscles. So we want both fast twitch muscle fibers. So all muscles have both fibers. So we want both the fibers to be strong. And so there's fast twitch Kegels would be if you're doing contract release, contract release, contract release, contract release. And then a slow twitch is contract and hold. That's your endurance fibers.
Okay.
The hardest part, and then I'll stop. The hardest part about Kegels that most people get wrong is they do not fully release before they contract again. That's harder than the contraction for most people. And that's where it can help having a pelvic floor therapist, like internally assessing your contractions and doing a feeling, and they can tell you like, oh, if there's an imbalance or whatever, we can read a lot of information from internal digital work, but most people struggle to fully release. So I say it's sort of like the bicep is the easiest way. Like if you think of like a full bicep curl like this, it'd be like if you're working out like this.
Yeah.
And that's not good. You want to get the full length of the muscle, and then you're strong. When you can start from the bottom up. So
yes. They tell you that at the gym too. That's really interesting. I don't know if I've ever really fully let my pelvic floor like relax. Like I'm actually practice that part because I think we hold a lot of like tension and stress, and we're used to putting more tension and more stress and like, kind of forcing through just as a part of human nature. But that relax, that calm, slow down.
Yeah. Like sometimes that's all people need, and they think they need Kegels, but they actually need to relax their pelvic floor. So you're 100% correct. When we go into fight or flight, like one of the things our bodies does is we clench. That's where anal retentive comes from. We clench down there. We clench all our holes and we tighten up. So I think the culture we live in, everybody's stressed, and then you're sitting. So you're just, that's kind of cueing you to clench down there. So I see, when I was in clinic, I would see a lot more like pelvic floor tightness and dysfunction in people who had really stressful jobs where they were holding space for other people, like therapists, divorce lawyers, like people who are sitting and just like, and their pelvic floor is just, and so, and for that, diaphragmatic breathing, restorative yoga poses with your knees open, like a supported kind of frog pose, like just stuff like that.
Yes. All right. So we have another question. Can you talk about leaking during orgasm? Is that an indication of a weak pelvic floor?
I don't like to say without doing an internal assessment. It could be if it's not it'd be interesting to know if it's, because there is female ejaculation and then there's urine, and the ejaculation, I'm a little rusty on this, but the female ejaculation and the info, because nobody really cares, so there's not a lot of research done on female pleasure and what's happening, but I think the last consensus I found was that it's technically urine, but it's like mixed with some, I don't want to misspeak. But it doesn't smell like urine. It's not exactly urine, but it's comprised of similar.
We did a whole episode on it, actually. If you go way, way, way back to the beginning, we did a whole segment on the female orgasm and female ejaculation. I forget the exact gland, but there is a gland that actually like retains the fluid, and when it comes out, it does mix with, but like it's a whole different thing. And apparently everyone is capable.
But I think, if it's during orgasm, that leads me to believe that probably is some type of ejaculation, which I don't see a problem with. But if you're, but mm,
And
yeah, I mean, I would recommend getting assessed. Like we do what's called MMTs, manual muscle testing. So that's something all physical therapists do. And again, usually it's like the bicep and it blew my mind when I did my certification and they were like, oh, we're going to do vaginal like MMTs. Like you're going to go in and then like you have people contract and you're like, you're grading it like out of a 5 and you're like, that's about a 3. And then the right side, ooh, that's a 5. It's like your little finger. And information in there. So like that's really how you know if you have a weak pelvic floor. And I'm not I hate to say this because there's so few pelvic PTs out there, especially if you're not in a big city, but I do really think it's important to have a manual assessment if you're comfortable with it to determine if that is what's happening. It could be imbalance in muscles. It could be a weak pelvic floor. It could be a tight pelvic floor. Like, I just don't like to diagnose without, yeah.
yeah. No, that's awesome. And also, looking at what the anatomy is around that question, because it's fair, if we're talking about that happening to a male or someone with a penis, then that's a whole different set of anatomical.
Yeah, that's a different pathway.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that would be a good segue to talk about continence if you wanted.
Okay, so yes, let's talk a little bit about incontinence, and then you'll have to tell us more about the work that you're doing with Pelvic Sanctuary and all that. Yes. So
Yeah, I mean, just that I think with continence, so I just want to give some tips on that. Like, you should be, if you're going, I'm going to talk about urinary continence. So so that's more common, I would say. And you should be going pee like no more than every 3 hours. So, and if you are not a senior, you should not be getting up to go during the night, like maybe one time, but actually they say if that should only be for seniors. So, um, and so I think like just one of the most common things that I'm seeing is everybody's really into sparkling water, including myself. I'm like a total sparkling water addict. That irritates your bladder lining and makes you have to go pee more often. And then it can train you to be incontinent. So I just want people I feel like everyone needs to know that because everybody's all into their look. And I'm guilty of it too. But like, if you're having problems, like that's usually when because people come up to me all the time. They're like, tell me what's going on as soon as they find out what I do. And almost, I'd say a lot of the time, if it's young, especially with younger folks, I'm like, do you drink a lot of sparkling water? And then I'm like, try stopping for like a couple days and see what happens. But also caffeine, citrusy things, all these like chocolate, these things can kind of irritate your bladder, so you can minimize your intake. Don't minimize your intake of flat water. Like that will actually make your urine more acidic and that will irritate your bladder lining as well. So you should take sips of flat water throughout the day if you're having trouble with that. And then and then we call it training your bladder. There's a term called key in the door syndrome. So when you get home and you're like holding it,
yeah.
you put the key in the door, you're like, it's gonna come. You're just like, your body just is like, you can't quite wait. Or as soon as you see the toilet, you're like, like,
Right.
and so
It wasn't terrible until that exact moment.
yeah. So you can, it's literally, I tell my dominatrixes when I do the workshops for them, I'm like, dom your bladder. You are training your bladder to have this urge incontinence. You're training it to like, see these things and know that it's going to go. But if you are having that issue, stop, take a deep breath, do 3 Kegels, 3 contractions, and just calm yourself down until you're, and wait. Like I was getting it for a little while because I was drinking way too much sparkling water, and I just would stand in front of the toilet, breathe, and wait, and domed my bladder back, and now it's fine. This can also happen if you pee in the shower a lot. Like, some of us like to pee in the shower because it's convenient, and that trains your brain to hear running water. When it hears running water, it's like, oh, it's time to pee. So, yeah. And then there's urge incontinence, and then we have stress incontinence. And stress incontinence is not psychological stress, it's stress on the pelvic floor. So there's 2 types. So one is more training and then they can also be mixed, but one is more training your bladder. The other one is making sure your pelvic floor is strong and not tight, but strong, like we talked about, that full length of the muscle is in good. So
yes, I appreciate that. The idea of training your bladder against incontinence versus the idea of holding your pee. Like I feel like they're the same and they're uniquely different. Like one you're doing with a purpose and the other one you might just be out of necessity.
Yeah. I mean, another trick. So I won't drink sparkling water when I'm going to be at a party or I'm going to be driving a long time. Like, you can be a little more mindful of when you consume things. The first signal, also don't go the first time you feel the urge. That the first urge, our body's pretty cool like that. The first urge isn't like, we got to go. But if you start going that way, then it will start to feel that way, if that makes sense. So your first urge, the complaint, is to be like, hey, we're starting to get full here. We're going to need to go soon. I'm sending you a little signal. And then if you go, okay, got it, I'm going to take a deep breath, I'm going to wait, and then you let it pass, you'll notice it goes away. Do that a couple, like 2 to 3 times before you actually go. Don't go just in case, or, just train your bladder, be patient. And you can do toe curls and calf raises will also give your brain a signal. For some reason, the same part of the brain lights up when you contract your pelvic floor and when you curl your toes. So I think that's where the curl toeing orgasm phrase came from, I'm guessing, before they, I love when science proves like old sayings.
Yes.
So if you're having trouble also like learning how to do a Kegel, you're like, I can't find my pelvic floor, I don't feel it, try curling your toes and then squeezing. But also that'll tell your bladder to chill out and give you a minute. So
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you. Tell us a bit more about your work, how we can find and support you, and things you have coming up.
Yeah. So Pelvic Sanctuary, we're in our 2nd year. So again, our mission is to develop free educational programming for communities in Los Angeles and beyond that focus on pelvic health concerns of marginalized and stigmatized populations. So our programs are geared towards LGBTQIA+ and sex workers. We just got 2 grants, our first 2 grants. We got one from New Moon Fund, and they're paying for us to do some programs at Children's Temple of Lilith, which is this amazing sex ed space run by this dominatrix, Tara Indiana, in Boyle Heights, Los Angeles. So we're going to have some sex worker education programs there. And then I just found out this morning that we got a grant from Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence.
Yes, we love the sisters.
I'm so honored. And we're going to do at the Tom of Finland Foundation in Los Angeles, we're going to do a workshop for gay men's pelvic health. And then we're going to do another one for transmasculine men's pelvic health. So we'll have 2 different weekends where we have workshops there. And we're just going to be talking to different spaces all next year about, creating more stuff. And And then we have, I'm honestly like doing a lot of this on my own. So I'm just experimenting. Like sometimes I throw up reels on my Instagram. I'm experimenting with TikTok and like throwing out little educational tidbits like these tips I gave today. Um, and what else? We have our first fundraiser happening December 9th, which is going to be at Akbar, which is like my favorite gay bar in LA. It's on Sunset Boulevard. It's really chill and fun. It's got like the local gay bar kind of vibe that everybody loves. And we have an intersex comedian named 7G who's going to perform and also talk a little bit about the intersex community. And we also, I just found out yesterday, we have Hank Chen, who's a gay male comedian who's really amazing. I think he has Hank Chen. I believe he has a new special. It's on like HBO or like one of those big platforms. I'm sorry, I don't know which one at the moment, but if you look up Hank Chen, he's hilarious. And he also happened to have broken his pelvis recently in a motorcycle accident. So I was like, okay, perfect. So, and we'll have a raffle. We have all kinds of awesome raffle prizes. And my friend Celeste is going to do tarot. She's very sexy performance artist, musician, like kind of a LA sex goddess icon friend of mine. So she's going to be there doing some tarot reading. And so that's December 9th from 6 to 9 p.m. at Akbar, AKBAR in Silver Lake. And
is there any way people can support that effort online?
Yes. So you could, and I'm sorry, the event is called Justice for Genitals. So you can find the tickets are on Eventbrite. So if you go to Eventbrite and you search Justice for Genitals, you'll find it. If you can't attend and you would like to make a donation, we are registered as a 501c3 charitable nonprofit, so you can get a tax write-off on Venmo and PayPal. So you could send to info@pelvicsanctuary.org and you will find us, and you can just make a direct donation there. Our website is pelvicsanctuary.org. I have a podcast as well called Health Queery with 2 E's. It's kind of separate so I can be a little more political. And Health Queery. So that's health, Queery. And that's really like kind of an open space. I'm just talking to I know so many amazing people. So it's just an excuse to have conversations and reach out to people I want to talk to more about just holistic health, and not just queer folks, but just, again, marginalized populations, people with disabilities, and not just pelvic health, though I do lean to end up talking about that naturally. But I've interviewed sex workers about spirituality and all kinds of stuff. So
okay, I have to be on the show. I'm just gonna volunteer myself to be on the show.
Yes, please. Yes. Of course.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to steal all your guests. I'm like, you. And then I'm like, oh, I just want to interview everyone on Nika's podcast too.
Oh my God.
We'll start with you though, the queen.
Okay. Yes. And it's such a beautiful community, the way that we come together and we support each other and just do all this work. It's wonderful.
I know. It's such a good time.
Yes. Okay. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you so much for doing the show and just being a part of the work you do. I cannot wait to continue spreading it and sharing it. Anybody go Justice for Genitals, Eventbrite, support, make a difference in this area, because there's so much that we have to overcome and we get to power through right now. It's just a different space in the world. So let's stand for genital justice. Like, I just don't even know how to say it. Like, let's stand for that space. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. This is the ItCast Real Talk on Sex, our community outreach podcast that increases diversity in conversations on health and sexuality. And through this work, we are creating a world where all people feel loved, honored, and respected. This episode is brought to you by the International Institute for Sexual Empowerment and the House of Sherelle. We have the Global Sexual Health and Freedom Summit coming up in February, now known as the IISE Global Summit, and we're going to be reclaiming sexuality. We have some really amazing conversations and some speakers who are just going to open up your world. Get open, allow yourself to heal, and celebrate. So stoked about that. And I'm sure the QR code is there in the corner. So definitely check it out. You can also join us at our weekly Freedom Support Group, Sundays, 12 to 1 Pacific, all online. That is hosted by the House of Sherelle and Ethology Collective. You can get one-on-one coaching with me by visiting my Calendly and booking a session. Leave your comments on the show here. Ask us anything, send them in so that we can have them answered. Get access to our bonus content on Patreon. Learn more about the work at theitcast.com. Subscribe to this YouTube channel and share with your community. Thank you. We will see you here next week.